Good morning to you. It's 8 o'clock. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. We'll have more of Charlie's world-exclusive interview with Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian president is warning America, if you strike, expect repercussions. A major business school conducts an experiment to get more women into the executive suite. And Serena Williams beat the wind and the second seed at the U.S. Open last night to claim her 17th Grand Slam title. She's here in Studio 57 looking like a champion. But first, here's a look at today's eye-opener at 8.
In fact, there's a strike. There would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others.
Yeah, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect.
This is Assad's only television interview since President Obama asked Congress to authorize a strike against Syria for an alleged chemical weapons attack last month.
Right now, we're in the propaganda phase, and he has to tell the American public, if you're worried about retaliation, I need to fan those worries.
This is a pivotal week for the Obama White House. It's the most important week of the second term of his presidency because the way the Syria debate turns out will likely influence many other things the president hopes to accomplish in his second term.
Haunting video confession of a drunk driver. Is it sincere remorse or a legal maneuver?
You had your kid's DNA mapped. Is it something you recommend?
Well, listen, I think information is power. And so you want to know what you're up against. And so the more you know, the more you can hopefully change your behavior and do the right thing.
Police have apologized for the incident. They said Prince Andrew has accepted that apology, but behind palace walls, he is said to be furious.
The green jacket owned by the first ever winner of the Masters sold for a whopping $682,000. Charlie Rose tried it on Friday right here in Studio 57.
I mean, let's be honest, that fit Charlie exceedingly well.
I'm Nora O'Donnell with Gail King and Jeff Lord. Charlie Rose is returning from assignment in Damascus, where he sat down with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. It is Assad's first television interview since President Obama asked Congress to authorize military action against Syria for an alleged chemical weapons attack last month.
The White House says more than 1,400 people died in the attack, including 400 children. The House and Senate convened this afternoon after a 5-week recess to take up the issue. Charlie asked Assad if he believes Washington will go ahead with military action against his country.
Do you expect an airstrike?
As long as the United States doesn't obey the international law and trample over the Charter of the United Nations, we have to worry that any administration, not only this one, would do anything. But according to the lies that we've been hearing for the last 2 weeks from high-ranking officials in this administration, we have to expect the worst.
Are you prepared?
We've been living in difficult circumstances for the last 2 years and a half, and we prepare ourselves for every possibility. But that doesn't mean if you're prepared, things would be better. It's going to get worse with any foolish strike or stupid war.
What do you mean worse?
Worse because of the repercussions, because nobody can tell what the repercussion of the first strike, or you're talking about one region, bigger region. It's not only about Syria, it's interlinked region, it's intermingled, interlocked, whatever you want to call it. If you strike somewhere, you have to expect the repercussions somewhere else in different forms, in a way that you don't expect.
Are you suggesting that if in fact there's a strike, there would be repercussions against the United States from your friends in other countries like Iran or Hezbollah or others?
Yeah, as I said, it may take different forms, direct and indirect. Direct when people want to retaliate, or governments. Indirect when you're going to have instability and the spread of terrorism all over the region that will influence the West directly.
Have you had conversations with Russia, with Iran, with Hezbollah about how to retaliate?
We don't discuss this issue as a government, but we discuss the repercussions, which is more important because sometimes repercussions could be more destroying than the strike itself. Any American strike will not destroy as much as the terrorist has destroyed in Syria. So sometimes the repercussions could be many doubles the strike itself.
But some have suggested that it might tip the balance in the favor of the rebels and lead to the overthrow of your government.
Exactly. Any strike will be as direct support to Al-Qaeda offshoot that's called Al-Nusra, Jabhat al-Nusra, and the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. You're right about this. It's going to be direct support.
This is about chemical warfare, and let's talk about that. Do you approve of the use of chemical warfare?
What do you mean?
The use of chemicals, deadly chemicals?
Do I think that we have to use also?
No, do you think that it is an appropriate tool of war to use chemicals?
The chemical?
Yes.
We are against any WMD, any weapons of mass destruction, whether chemical or nuclear. And
so you're against the use of chemical warfare?
Yeah, it's not only me. As a state, as a government, in 2001, we proposed to the United Nations proposal to empty or to get rid of every WMD in the Middle East, and the United States stood against that proposal. So this is our conviction and policy.
But you're not a signatory to the chemical warfare
not yet.
Agreement.
Yet.
Why not?
Because Israel has WMD and it has to sign, and Israel occupying our land. So that's why we talked about Middle East, not Syria, not Israel. It should be comprehensive.
Do you consider chemical warfare equivalent to nuclear warfare?
I don't know, we haven't tried either.
Yeah, but you know, you're a head of state and you understand the consequences of weapons that don't discriminate.
Technically, they're not
beyond.
Yeah, technically they're not the same, but morally it's the same.
Morally, they're the same.
They have the same, but at the end, killing is killing.
An incredible interview by Charlie, and yet Syria has a very large stockpile of chemical weapons, according to multiple intelligence communities around the world. I think, as John Miller pointed out, this is in part propaganda, too, by the Syrian president. He says that military airstrike, he said, will be direct support to the al-Qaeda offshoot. In the full interview that you will see tonight on PBS, you will see Charlie press President Assad very hard just how many of these rebels, these opposition, are actually al-Qaeda.
He's very matter of fact and very in control. And I think for many in the American public, this is the first time we've ever heard him speak. And he's making it clear that he says he didn't do it, that he had nothing to do with the chemical release.
You have a very soft-spoken guy who at least seems, outward appearances, to be non-threatening, who's making these not-so-subtle threats and very dangerous statements. I think that separation in this interview is striking. We're going to see more of that.
And he's clearly paying attention to what we're doing here in the United States. In our next half hour, Assad tells Charlie what he says to those who call him a butcher. You can see the entire interview with Syrian President Assad tonight on Charlie Rose on PBS.
The Senate is expected to vote this week on a resolution that would give President Obama the authority to launch limited missile strikes. The president is making a last-ditch effort to win support. Last night, he stopped by a dinner Vice President Joe Biden held for Republican senators. Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill. Nancy, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jeff. Well, we've been crunching the numbers here on Capitol Hill, and currently the president's resolution has more support in the Senate than it does in the House, though it's still far from a sure bet in the Senate. Take a look at our numbers. Currently, CBS News has 27 senators who we've categorized as either yes or leans yes based on what they've told us or what they've said publicly. 23 are no or lean no. So nearly split down the middle in the Senate right now, with about half of the Senate still undecided. But take a look at the numbers that we have for the House. There, 68 members have already said they are voting no, and only 16 have said they're voting yes. Add in the members who appear to be leaning one way or the other, and you've got 184 in the no column, just 36 in the yes column. Now, these numbers could still change. The vote is still many days away. There are still 200 members of the House that are undecided. They say they're waiting to hear what they can learn in a classified briefing tonight, and they're waiting to see what the president has to say in his televised address tomorrow night. Jeff, Nora, Gail.
Nancy, thank you. And many in the White House would acknowledge if the vote were held today, it would probably fail in the House. President Obama can count on support from his former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Clinton will speak at the White House today on another topic, but she also plans to reiterate her support of the president's effort to get congressional backing for a military strike.
President Obama will sit down with CBS Evening News anchor Scott Pelley today. Tomorrow night, the president will take his case directly to the American people in a primetime address to the nation. Major Garrett is at the White House. Major, good morning to you.
Good morning, Gail, Nora, and Jeff. The White House goal is to make President Obama a nearly inescapable presence in the next couple of days. In addition to talking to CBS, 5 other television network interviews today, that primetime address tomorrow night from the White House. Now, interestingly, White House aides tell us the goal is not to change the message or introduce anything new to this subject, which is now becoming familiar to the American public. The goal is to drive the president's current message as aggressively as possible. White House aides also concede they don't expect the president to change the poll numbers on this question, which still run lopsidedly against a military strike against Syria. What they intend to do is use the president's advocacy today and tomorrow to convince members of Congress who are on the fence or doubtful that it's the right thing to do to support the president. Now, that's become more problematic in the Senate this week than it was last week. About 8 to 12 Senate Democrats are either no or leaning no. That could make things very difficult for the White House. So a persuasive campaign today and tomorrow is what the White House is hoping will turn the tide.
Major Garrett, we thank you. It is now 8:10. Time now to check your local weather.
Television history is in the making tonight.
We're taking our cues from you and Charlie. We figured whatever you and Charlie do, we're going to do the same thing.
We'll talk with Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff about taking over a broadcasting legacy. That's ahead on CBS This Morning.
How high can she jump at the U.S. Open last night? Serena Williams proved again why she is the #1 ranked tennis player in the world. Thank you very much. She defeated second seed Victoria Azarenka to win her 5th Open and 17th Grand Slam. Serena Williams, the champion, is with us this morning. I'm telling you, it was 2 hours and 45 minutes of torture for those of us who were watching in the stand because we were so nervous for you.
Yeah.
And at the end, did it take longer than you thought? Because when I got there, they said, "Oh, this will be over at 6:30. We can make dinner plans."
Yeah. Well, I didn't really realize it would be 2 hours and 45 minutes, and so after the first 2 sets, I looked and I saw it was over 2 hours, and that had been longer than any match I had played, like the whole tournament, almost twice longer. So I really just tried to, just hang in there and just think about not the timing, but just the match. Sorry, I ruined your dinner.
No.
I didn't mean to.
How dare you?
Good.
I know.
Is her grunting distracting to you? Because after a while, we were all going, "Oh," and then sometimes your grunting would get very progressive.
Yeah, I get
Is it
really loud
distracting to
too
you?
sometimes. Not at all.
No, wow.
When you're out there in the moment, you hear it. I don't hear it. Like I hear it maybe in the beginning, but after that, I literally don't hear anything. I'm just trying to play the point.
Mm-hmm. This is your 5th U.S. Open win. Your 17th Grand Slam.
She's wild.
Do you like
you're watching really closely?
I was like trying to remember the points because it was so crazy.
Is this win different in any way?
This win is different because everyone is different, only because of that. And, it's the first time I was able to defend my title here in New York because I won last year. And actually, I've never won back-to-back titles. So, in a way, that's a little different.
Do you think you're playing your best tennis ever?
I think so. I do know for a fact, though, that I am having a lot of fun out there. Is it my best tennis? I don't know. I don't like to think about that. I think when I'm all done and I put up the racket, in 20 years, I'll be
20 years.
We heard you.
At 51.
Exactly. I'll be able to say, then I'll be able to be like, oh, this was my best moment, or that was my best moment. So I really can't answer that question right now.
Can we talk about the wind last night?
Oh my gosh.
What was happening? How was it affecting you? How'd you deal with that?
It was killing me. My dress was
outfit,
just going everywhere, and I couldn't quite get control, and I kept missing shots. And granted, she was playing in the same conditions, and at some point she was actually just playing better and handling the conditions better than me. But particularly on that side that you see right there, it was really like a windstorm just in that area. So that side in particular was really tough.
They said that your coach, how do you say his last name?
Muratoglu.
That he's the catalyst behind your return to the top. What did he add to your game that you didn't have before?
That's a good question. I think consistency. I mean, I pretty much I won, before I met him, I won 13 Grand Slams.
There's rumors, there's been pictures of the two of you canoodling.
Serena, I know.
How do you navigate business and pleasure?
You don't mix business and pleasure. I'm a firm believer in not mixing business and pleasure. But, I also believe that Yeah, it was like, I think I won like 13 or so before. And then, so I think what he had mostly is just consistency. I think I like to believe that I had the game, but at the same time, it's just about bringing it all together and then just reaching even higher potential more often.
Serena
And you
Williams,
did that.
Fabulous to have you here.
Congratulations.
Thank you so
very
much. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Welcome back to CBS This Morning. Coming up in this half hour, more of Charlie's interview with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. CBS News analyst Frank Luntz looks at what President Obama needs to say in order to convince the American people it is time for action. Plus, big changes in the nation's capital tend to follow elections, but a Washington media institution is getting a new look today. We'll talk to Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff about TV news history in the making. That's coming up.
First, it's time to show you this morning's headlines from around the globe. LiveScience.com says a new study suggests the benefits of early mammograms. A study by Harvard researchers finds getting screened before the age of 50 dramatically reduces deaths from breast cancer. The study looked at more than 7,000 women.
Britain's Guardian says Dennis Rodman told the world the name of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un's baby daughter. Her name is Jue. It's believed Kim's wife secretly gave birth late last year. The former basketball star Rodman arrived in China on Saturday, showing pictures of his trip to North Korea. And in Pyongyang today, Kim watched a military parade celebrating his nation's 65th birthday.
The Wall Street Journal looks at how too much togetherness can ruin retirement. According to a psychologist, couples who do everything together, Nora and Jeff Glor, pay attention, are usually not satisfied. A better approach may be doing separate but related activities. I only say that because you two are the married people at the table, that's all.
Well, see, I'm always a believer in like a couple that golfs together, stays together, a couple that cooks together, stays together, but maybe not so in retirement. That's what they're saying.
I think togetherness is a good thing.
Hobbies.
Yeah,
I like it. I like it.
London's Independent says a long-lost painting by Vincent van Gogh has been found. The work is called Sunset at Montmajour. Van Gogh painted the work in 1888. It depicts the rocky landscape of a vineyard town in southern France with an abbey in the background. The Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam did not say who owns the painting. It will go on display later this month.
You could paint with your spouse, right? That might work.
Yeah.
Britain's Telegraph says one of James Bond's most famous cars is being auctioned off today. It's the submarine car featured in the film The Spy Who Loved Me back in 1977. There it is. Roger Moore drove it. It is said to be fully operational underwater. The car is expected to sell for up to $1.5 million.
And the New York Daily News says Grammy winner Bruno Mars will sing at this year's Super Bowl halftime show. The game will be played at the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, but some fans think a local star like Billy Joel or Bruce Springsteen, Bon Jovi would be more appropriate. Bruno Mars is from Hawaii, but he likes the Super Bowl, too. He's got lots of hits. So we'll see. Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad is breaking his silence. In his first TV interview since President Obama asked Congress to authorize a strike against Syria, Assad spoke with Charlie Rose in Damascus on Sunday. Charlie asked the Syrian president how he's changed over the years and why many consider him to be a butcher.
When I first interviewed you, there was talk of Bashar al-Assad. He's the hope. He's the reformer. That's not what they say anymore.
Who?
People who write about you, people who talk about you, people who analyze Syria and your regime.
Exactly. So the hope for American is different from the hope of Syrian. For me, I should be the hope of the Syrian, not any other one, not American, neither North American, neither French or anyone in the world. I'm president to help Syrian people. So this question should start from the hope of the Syrian people. And if there's any change regarding that hope, we should ask the Syrian people, not anyone else in the world.
But now they say, their words, a butcher. Comparisons to the worst dictators ever to walk on the face of the earth, comparing you to them. Using weapons that go beyond warfare. Everything they could say bad about a dictator, they're now saying about you.
First of all, when you have a doctor who cut the leg to prevent the patient from the gangrene, if you have to, you don't call him butcher, you call him a doctor. And I thank him for saving the lives. When you have terrorism, you have war. When you have war, you always have innocent lives that could be the victim of any war.
Tomorrow night, President Obama will outline his case for strikes on Syria in an address to the nation in prime time. He faces a skeptical public and a divided Congress. With us now is CBS News analyst and Republican strategist Frank Luntz. Frank, good morning to you.
Good morning.
In your estimation, why is the president having such a difficult time rallying the support of not only Congress, but the American people?
Well, think about it. For 50 years, it has been the Republicans who are most likely to use military action and the Democrats who've said no. And now you're asking Congress to reverse that. Democrats are supporting it and Republicans are opposing it. And so I think that there's a political dynamic in here that nobody's talking about, that people are making decisions on where they stand in Washington, not just based on where their constituents stand, but politics. And the second point I'd make is that I think the president's making a mistake by making it so much about him. Because in the end, you've got half Americans vote Democrat, half vote Republican. You've got to bring everyone into it. It's got to be about Syria and not just about the president.
Is he staking a significant portion of his presidency on this debate?
Absolutely. And there are domestic issues that we are facing over the coming weeks. We got the debt, the deficit, sequester, potential government shutdown, the president's health care plan. All of this is happening at exactly the same time. And so he goes to the American people because he is such a good communicator. The problem is he waited too long.
You just touched on the role of politics. Do you have any specifics of why you say that? Why they're making a difference here?
Yes, we've been doing focus groups all through this process. We got more coming up tomorrow and through the coming week. And in the research that we have done, 70% of Republicans oppose what the president is doing. And I believe, as a researcher, that if this had been George Bush and Dick Cheney, the Republicans would have been supportive of a military strike. Conversely, we see Democrats narrowly supporting it. If this had been Bush Cheney, overwhelmingly, they would have opposed it. I think politics is playing a major role.
You see this new poll, we've just got the screen up, that's out of CNN this morning. If Congress fails to pass a resolution, 71% oppose airstrikes. The president is doing 6 network interviews today and doing a primetime address on Tuesday night because they would not win the vote in Congress if it were held today.
I believe that. And I believe that he's having trouble even within his own party. Now, think about it. You've got Nancy Pelosi on the House side trying to win those votes. And she was one of the most vocal critics of the previous president's policies on Iraq. So you've got this completely twisted and turned. It's almost like this is an alternative universe right now, and this is very serious. And I want to make one more point, that the American people are more nervous about national security today than they have been in a long, long time. Domestic terrorism, what's happening in Syria. And so for the public to oppose military action at a time when they are so concerned about national security, that's significant.
It certainly is a full court press on the president's part. What do you think he needs to say? What do the American people need to hear from him tomorrow night?
They need to know that it won't make the situation even worse than it is today. And they need to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's some great British philosopher who said that whenever you commit military troops, you have to be able to pledge that it will have a positive impact and that the consequences won't be worse than the strike. At this point, the American people are nervous about those consequences.
Who is that some great British philosopher? Great British philosopher.
Martin Amis.
Yeah.
Frank, by the way, really quickly, Assad's messaging, how effective is that?
Well, I've never heard him speak until today, at least in a long form. And the fact that CBS got that interview is incredible. But the American people look at him and say, this is an evil guy. And we don't doubt that chemical weapons were used.
Without question, you think they say that?
Without question, yes. It's 80%. What they doubt is the impact of that strike, because neither the Democrats nor the Republican leaders in the House have made the case. And it has now been weeks since this had happened. We expect a response immediately.
Frank Luntz, thank you.
Thank you.
And tonight, for the first time, two women will co-anchor a national daily news program on public television. Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff will take over the helm of the PBS NewsHour. The pair has covered politics for a combined 7 decades, and the show's relaunch comes with Washington debating a military strike in Syria. Later today, Ifill interviews President Obama on the matter. She just sat down with him 2 weeks ago as well. Well, I sat down with both of them to get their take on what's at stake in Syria. Charlie Rose has interviewed the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who is accused of killing some 1,500 of his own people, and many of them children, more than 400 children. And he is completely denying that he had anything to do with this chemical weapons attack. Do you think that changes the debate?
I think it's important that Charlie got that interview. It's important we hear from Bashar al-Assad right now. But it's not surprising that he's saying this. I think we would all be stunned if he acknowledged that he was behind what happened to those innocent civilians a few weeks ago. I don't think it changes anything. I think people expect the regime of Syria to be in complete denial about what's going on.
Plus, the people who are worried about this war are not fond of Bashar al-Assad. They are just worried about the slippery slope that the U.S. would get into.
Is track 53, punch up 53?
Gwen Ifill and Judy Woodruff took over the iconic NewsHour at a critical time as the U.S. prepares for possible war. Two men, Jim Lehrer and Robert McNeil, created the program known for in-depth analysis and anchored it for most of its 40-year history. During that time, these veteran women journalists say a lot has changed. Were there times when people said things to you which you thought, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable?
When I started out as a reporter, it was the end of the 1960s, early 1970s, and what I faced when I was trying to get a job as a reporter was the news director said, we already have a woman reporter. We don't need another one right now.
My very first job and my very first newspaper I got because I came to work as an intern and found a racial slur directed at me at my workspace. And instead of getting insulted and suing or whatever wouldn't occur to me at the age of 20, I just hung in there.
Ifill began her career at a Boston newspaper in the late 70s. Woodruff started in television covering then-Governor Jimmy Carter in Atlanta.
Judy?
Both women have covered Congress, the White House, and between the two, moderated 3 vice presidential debates.
Kind of excited about it. It's our first time seeing it.
Now they will be at the news desk together in this studio. In some ways, it's a much more traditional set, if you think about it, with the two of you sitting side by side.
Well, most local newscasts are a man and a woman sitting together. This is not that traditional look. It's 2 people, but it's 2 women.
But we're taking our cues from you and Charlie. We figure whatever you and Charlie do, we're going to do the same thing.
Oh, start on the 2 the way you've been doing it.
Behind the scenes, they're taking cues from another woman, their boss, Linda Winslow, who's been the show's executive producer for 8 years.
And I happen to know at network news, there are women who are in decision-making positions. So we've come a long way. But in those front row seats, the faces that people see of news, I think we've been slower to recognize that women can make decisions.
Why is it important to have women in those front row seats?
I think it's important that when people watch the news, that they see a newscast, that they see people who are bringing them the news, who are reporting the news, who look like them, who look like America. And it's taken a long time, I think, for the television news business to get there.
These are 2 women who know. They've reported every story, anchored major conventions and questioned presidents, and it is going to be unusual to see 2 women sitting side by side.
It's no question, Nora, that they have the chops. I admire them both so much, and what an interesting time that they're taking over today.
Yes, I was teasing Gwen. I said not a bad couple of weeks to start. They had the interview with the president 2 weeks ago. Yeah. Gwen's got another interview tonight as the president makes his case.
You know, if I just left here, it'd be 2 women. Might be better anyway. So I can,
when are you leaving?
Take off if you need, guys.
What do you say, Gail?
Right this way, Mr. Moore.
I got the message.
No.
All right. Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook wants women to lean into their careers. At her alma mater, they are taking it a step further. Jodi Kantor of the New York Times shows us how the Harvard Business School is using students as guinea pigs. Will it level the playing field for women? That's next. But first, a check of your local weather.
Gotta see it my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can go on?
One of the 500 largest companies in the U.S., just 21 are led by women. That gender gap led one of the country's elite training grounds, the Harvard Business School, to try a bold experiment in gender equality. It goes far beyond the classroom. Jodi Kantor wrote about it this weekend for the New York Times. Jodi, I sat there and read every single word. It was so interesting yesterday. So we're delighted to have you here today. So they wanted to give themselves what they called a gender makeover, changing the classwork, the rules to foster female success. So what exactly did they do, including hand raising? Give us specifics of what they did.
I will, and I also want to tell you a little bit about the history here. This was not some PC program run amok. They really had serious problems. There was open sexual harassment in the classroom for years. There was a gender gap. Women were coming in with the same grades and scores as men and falling behind. Female faculty were not staying at the school. So they really had a serious impetus for addressing this. What they tried to do was really change the environment to make it much better for women. At Harvard, 50% of your grade is based on class participation. So that means that in the classroom, you have to be really assertive. You have to be willing to own the conversation, and women were not doing it. So part of what they really focused on was behavioral, how to insert yourself into a very complicated conversation with confidence. It's funny because these were very impressive students who arrived at Harvard, and yet one of the things they were taught when they got to the school was how to raise their hand in class. Well,
how hard is that?
Well, one student, Brooke Boyarsky, gave me an almost athletic demonstration of what they were teaching everybody, not just women, to do, which is she said, okay, you know, you hear the professor, you hear the question coming,
like a tiger prowling.
You hear the line that you're ready to address, and then boom, you go for it.
Jodi, I think this had people scratching their heads because you think Harvard Business School. The women that get into Harvard Business School are the smartest women in the country, the smartest business minds in the country, and presumably would be the business leaders among some of the other business schools. And they can't raise their hands in a classroom?
Well, part of what is going on is that for years and years, administrators and faculty saw the same problem, which is that married women or women in serious relationships were having an easier time. It was the single women who were really struggling because HBS is also a very social environment. These people are 26, 27 years old. They're looking for mates. And there was this choice. Do you want to be the pretty, dateable one, or do you want to be the ambitious, aggressive one? And the choice was too stark. And the single women I spoke to, or the women who were formerly single, really said that this was a problem.
So many of the students bristled at some of this social engineering. What were the results, though, after they enacted this program?
They made real progress. They had a record-setting number of women win academic honors this year. But I think what's just as important is that people really say the environment has changed. Women now say they truly do feel comfortable at the school.
Can I ask a question? Yes. Sorry, I actually don't have a question. I just want to do that really quickly. That's it.
Oh, that was
Thanks.
a joke.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Jodi.
Now they would tell you that was too restrained.
Yes,
you have to
really push it forward.
You got to go in.
All right.
Yeah. Jodi Kantor, thank you.
Jodi.
You're
Thank
watching
you.
CBS this morning.
Incredible show today. That does it for us.
Yes, Charlie would say we've had quite a morning here.
Yes, quite a morning.
Yeah.
Jeff, great to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Can't wait to watch every moment of this interview.
And Charlie has just landed back in the United States. He will be right back here tomorrow. Up next, your local news. We'll see you tomorrow on CBS This Morning.
Take it easy.
Closed captioning is proudly sponsored by Citrical.